All right. Welcome, everybody, to the panel called Compromising Art. So you might wonder what that means, and it will hopefully become clear to you during the panel, of course. But short explanation is when you create art, you have to do a lot of compromising, whether it's time or budget or interdisciplinary constraints and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to talk about. But I'm not the person who's going to talk about it. I'm just going to ask stupid questions to my panel. So I'm going to introduce you to my non-stupid panel. And first of all, I'd like to welcome up Johan Wahlbäck from Stunlock Studios. Well. Awesome. Welcome. And I also have with me today Tanja Waimer from Ludosity. Welcome.
Hello.
And not any less of an awesome person, Gustav Rosberg, who's working at Flamebait. And finally, from all the way from the south of Sweden, we have Johan Westman from Massive.
Hello, hello, hello.
Awesome. All right. So this is going to be interesting. We have a bunch of different disciplines within art here and very many years of experience gathered here on stage right now. So I'm going to jump into it. Are you guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah? Are you guys ready? Decently. How many of you are artists, by the way? Raise your hands. Also, pretty much most.
It's a lot of them.
Yes. Okay, cool. And the ones of you who aren't artists, this will hopefully be interesting to you as well, because you will know how the mind of an artist works, and that's important when you work with game development. So, okay, first question. I haven't read it yet. All right, so let's jump into the interdisciplinary thing, since I mentioned that right now. So, which disciplines do you rely on for your daily routine? So when you're working as an artist, who do you mainly work with in other disciplines or in other art disciplines?
Who goes first?
Whoever feels like it. You said something, so you can go first.
Yeah, sure. All right. I mean, I'm a senior environment artist, so you tend to work in pairs with level designers. So we tend to have a lot of communication because they are doing the blockouts and we art that stuff. So we have a very tight communication, but then you have tech art as well. You want to loop them in pretty early on if you're, starting out with, generating ideas and stuff like that. You want to know that things are feasible technically, and that's good to have them in early to kind of check so that's like actually possible to do those things.
Yeah.
And then lighting as well, but they usually come in pretty late, but we also keep them in early on when we talk about a level as well, so they know the mood, the theme that we're going for. But obviously it's hard to light something if there's no final art.
Exactly.
So they typically comes in when it's more a polished phase and things are more locked in, basically.
Okay.
And there's probably some more disciplines there that you need to
obviously
talk with, as well.
But that's the main collaboration.
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah. Have you had any, is there a common challenge or something within this? Is there someone who's harder to work with or some discipline like?
Nah, I don't know. Obviously, being in AAA, like a big studio, it's just hard in the nature that there's so many people in each teams.
Yeah.
But not really. Obviously, sometimes LDs do their kind of thing, right? They might go into only thinking about traversability and this kind of stuff, and they do kind of a roller coaster thing that might be hard to make into. To fit with the theme of the thing that you're doing, art-wise, and make sense of it all.
Exactly.
So that's a challenge, I guess.
Yeah, but that's a decent challenge, and I've come across it as well, where you kind of, there are two different mindsets: the artistic, talking about visual narration and composition and stuff like that, and then we have the more design-wise, where you look at the traversal, as you say. So very interesting. But Tanja, I know that you also work with environment art, but at a smaller company. So do you work with the same kind of people, or how does that look for you?
Well, our setup is a bit more unusual at the moment. So we are working closely together with another studio. So at Ludosity, we are a small team, but then we are working together with Fair Play Labs, and they are bigger than us. So our side is more the designing of things, and then the art then gets produced by Fair Play. So what I'm usually doing is more like designing the stages and doing the blockouts and all of these things, and then I'm closely working together with other designers from Ludosity, and just we also have a lot of internal play tests, just to make sure that the stages feel right. And then that goes over to Fair Play, and then they do the arts, and I then also give a lot of feedback there. So, yeah.
Oh, very interesting. So you sort of doing art direction towards this other studio, or how does that work when you give them the level and tell them make the art?
It's I'm working closely together with the art director at Fair Play. So, we are co-art directing basically.
Oh, interesting. And we also have an art director here, or maybe two. Are you an art director?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then we have two art directors here. So how does it look for you in this whole collaboration chain? We can start with Gustav.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I think I'm probably, of us here, working at the smallest studio. So being like a really small studio, everyone kind of relies on everyone all the time. Like there's a lot of intermingling. Like I can imagine like at Massive, for example, like with 500 employees, you probably not even met all of them.
Yeah. Like exactly 600-700. Yeah, and it's a lot of people.
Yeah. So like we're very tightly knit, and and I think the tendency is that a lot of pressure tends to be put on the programmer.
Oh, yeah.
Because the programmer makes cool tech arty stuff happen. But lately we've been trying to like kind of offload a lot of stuff from the programmer so he can focus more on like gameplay stuff and stuff that actually is the game. And we do more of the like tech art programming stuff now.
Cool. So how's it for you?
For us at Stunlock, we have a large focus on like the design process. So it's usually like most of the communication happens between like me as the art director and the design team. So basically they present a problem, like we need to solve this, and that is kind of where the discussion starts and where you start to compromise, and both from a design perspective and from an art perspective. Like you have to be able to maybe explain a mechanic through gameplay and just how do you do that. So the discussion kind of starts there, and you just build and compromise out from that.
Super interesting. So, well, it seems like even though you are a bunch of different sizes of companies here, there's still sort of this core where you need to collaborate with design in one way or another, no matter what your position is. And that is obvious. And I like that you mentioned the programming as well, Gustav, because that is an issue I've come across as well, where you kind of need to value someone's time, someone else's time. And then we can go into the compromising, which you actually mentioned, where you kind of have to move the tech art to you instead of having the programmer doing it. So do you have any other situation where you need to compromise, if we twist it around, where you need to compromise your artwork? I mean, you know that you can reach this quality level, but due to time or whatever, you must, enough is enough. So do you have any example of where that has happened?
Yeah, I mean, like that happens all the time. Like, we're not under like a publisher or anything, so we don't exactly have official milestones that someone else is setting. But we do set like internal kind of deadlines to keep us on track to do stuff. And like, what ends up happening is that we kind of already in the planning stage, we kind of prioritize how important is it that this thing gets done. And usually a lot of the stuff that's like, oh, this would be really, really cool. Like, I don't know, bird AI birds or something.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that kind of tends to get cut because that's not like part of the core experience we want to deliver. So we try to be very clear with ourselves from the get-go what the experience we're trying to deliver is. So that way it becomes easier to cut content.
Yeah, and that's very logical. But Joel, how is it for you? I mean, you work at a much larger company, and many decisions, I guess, is from higher up sometimes and so on. But do you still face these, like, you need to limit yourself or the content you can push out in order to maintain deadlines and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, sometimes when that's not done or like overscope a little bit, like there's scenarios on Division that we've, gone through a phase where like, oh, we might have to like cut a lot of this area or we like have to wall it off and stuff like that. And it's been good with that type of content though, because we use a lot of this. I don't know if a lot of people here have played Division, but you have this kind of big tarped up scaffoldings and stuff like that can kind of like, so that would be an emergency situation when you're propping the open world, that you can kind of just take that scaffold off an whole area and say, now you can't go there anymore. And that's like an easy way out. But I mean, in this particular case, we just ended up getting, also the benefit of being in a big studio, we ended up getting help from people from another team that could come in and actually deliver art for us there, so we could prop that. But that stuff tends to happen all the time, and you need to be aware of technical constraints. Yeah,
of course. So that is of course logical. You always have these time frames and so on, and it's as you say, you had these scaffoldings as sort of the plan B. If we can't make it, we need something here at least. Like we need to do something. So.
And that's also a lot easier when it's more like open world kind of stuff, where it's not so narrative driven, because that when it gets a little bit more tricky, because if you gotta cut a mission or they've already done mocap for a certain scene or something like that, and it's like we need to have this beat in the story for it to make sense, then there's just a bigger kind of ripple effect on a lot of different departments.
Yeah.
Which, like this case, it would only really affect art and maybe level design a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. But Tanja, as you're also working with an external company to sort of deliver the art. Have you ever come across a situation where you need to like tell them to make less or like stay within the scope, or do they always like deliver whatever you ask?
Well, in our project it was. We had a very set deadline, so they wanted the game to come out on a certain day. And also our stages, since our environments are stages to fight on, so it's a very contained space. So the camera is not moving far out, so you can't explore the area, so you're confined to one space, which also makes the planning a lot easier, because we only have this space and it's only things are only visible in this space, so it was much easier to just know how many assets you will need.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good way of limiting stuff, like when you have the opportunity as you have, where you have this closed area and you can see quite clearly that we're going to need this much. But I know that the art directors here, you come in a much earlier stage where you might not have the complete picture from the beginning when you start planning and stuff and coming up with the art style and stuff like that. How do you sort of limit yourself when you have this like limitless possibility in one way? Johan?
No, I think it's a really, really tricky thing, because like total freedom is actually one of the most terrifying things I can imagine. Like it's really hard to do something focused when you have all this space. So like starting to compromise, I think it's something that starts at the very beginning of the project. Like you have an idea, and then you have to start look at, what are my abilities, what are my sensibilities, and also what does my team excel at doing? And all of those are already compromises. And you just kind of start to funnel that down until you have something, that relates to the core idea, but that you can actually make focused, right? And that is, you have to compromise at every step of game development, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it sure did. Do you agree? Do you need to compromise from day one?
Kind of like, I think you do need to like kind of set up a rule set for yourself, if nothing else. Like, because otherwise, like you said, it just becomes like a blank page syndrome where it's like, I don't have anything to go off of. So like, you need to like start with something like, okay, it's, I don't know, it's this type of texturing style, and it's this type of world or whatever. Like just something to. It could be like completely arbitrary as well. It's like we're never going to use the color purple, or like the color purple is really important and everything is built around the color purple. Whatever. But like something like that helps get things rolling. Yeah. Other than that, though, I tend to not really compromise on the artistic stuff until like pre-production.
Okay.
Because that's kind of the purpose of a lot of pre-production, like where you kind of figure out all the unknown factors. It's like we want to try and do this procedural animation thing, and it sounds super cool. Okay, let's try it during pre-production. And then it turns out, yeah, no, we don't know how to do procedural animation. Yeah. So that's when it starts like, okay, answering questions and unknown factors, and that kind of sets the tone for the project. You don't want to have too many technical questions by the end of pre-production. And
it's kind of a step-by-step process. Like you start to evaluate different ideas, and then you kind of find out what works and what doesn't, and that kind of hones that focus, kind of funnels it down into something more specific, so that you have a good idea when you get out of pre-production what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
And of course, stuff changes after that as well, depending on do you feature creep the game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, more and more features, like the more inspired you get, the more stuff you want to add. So you really need to know kind of the focus, the core experience, so that you can actually cut the less important stuff.
Yeah. But if we sort of think about it more from a personal space, then you as an artist individually, like if you well, either you get a task from someone like, oh, you need to create this, we need this for our game, and you feel like, I'm not sure how to do that. Do you sort of, are you clear with, no, I'm not going to be able to do that, or it's going to take a hell of a lot of time because I need to learn it while I'm doing it, or do you kind of, you make it happen because you're told so? Can start with a big company.
In those cases, like at NASA, we're fortunate that there's so many experts in the building, right? So I would just reach out to anyone who I think would be the likely candidate to help me with that, and that would, could vary from tech art to lighting or anything else, or if it's props as well. Like we don't make a lot of assets ourselves, so. There could be limitations there that you need to talk with your props and then later outsourcing team to make sure that they're doing the same thing. But I don't. What was the question again?
Yeah, you sort of answered it. Yeah. It's like if you feel limitations within yourself when you're going to create something, and if I get you correctly, then you sort of, since you are a large company, you have experts probably within that field, so you can sort of hand that task over or.
Yeah, and then we would assess that together, I think. If like, then I could probably, if it's a small thing, they're just like, why don't you use our system that maybe I didn't even know existed? Then I'm like, shit, we have that? Great. I should probably use that then. Yeah. Thank you for showing that to me. And but if it's something bigger than, like, so that's where the whole collaboration comes in, when you need to just be very communicative with the people that you have around you.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. I mean, communication is generally the largest problem at any company, and it's the biggest solution to everything as well. So it's sort of this balance.
It's a tricky one. You got to get people to be comfortable doing that. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a studio like ours, is to get in people and get them warmed up to be able to just go up to a person and say like, hey, can you help me with this? Or I don't know this. And also be vulnerable in that sense of showing that I don't know everything. Yeah. Let down that guard and reach out to people. I think
that's a very good tip. And I think that is super important, to just kind of help each other instead of feeling like I need to prove something to everyone. But how do you, Tanja, as you're working a lot with design to sort of build the levels, and is there some cases where you feel like you need to give away, or if you get a task or something, or how do you work with that?
When I have something where I'm not sure if I'm doing this thing correctly, I will just go to the person that I know and how to do this, and I will just talk to them and just ask them, these are my ideas. Is that correct, or should I do something else?
Yeah, but that is awesome, because I've heard artists who kind of have this pride in, like, I should be able to do this, and they just spend too much time on it, and then we need to compromise on something else because we don't have the time we should have for the next thing, and so on. So I think that is it's a good way to just like communicate, as you say.
But is that something for you guys that are like you, for example, that work at a smaller studio? Do you feel like you end up in those situations more often where people like, I am the only artist here, so I need to know everything and I want to try and solve everything myself?
I'm not the only artist at the studio, so like a lot of the times I do kind of try and like ball things back and forth with other people, but like there are some issues that I have definitely gotten stuck on. Like I can't really let it go. Like foliage is like one of those classic things. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make the foliage look really, really great, and then 2 months later it looks slightly worse.
I guess also being like a smaller studio, you would probably have a better understanding of the capability of your teams and what they can tackle. So you would also be able to scope that in your mind already before even having to ask the question, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think when there is like a task that feels really big and unreasonable, like I don't know, for example, we got to get 50 characters done or something. Like that's a lot of characters to get done for a team of like 7 people. So like in those cases, it's like I start by trying to find like, okay, how can we do this in a smart way? Maybe we could reuse and animate a skeleton with pre-done animations, and we don't have to spend that much time on animating, and try and find systematic ways of breaking problems like that down if they're that important to the experience.
Awesome. And that is a super interesting point. I actually have a question about this on my paper, believe it or not.
He came prepared.
Yeah, I came prepared. I have this. No, but actually what you're talking about there, like finding these loopholes, I was about to say, but ways to cut corners to sort of speed up the process where you realize I can't do all of this, but we need to find a way to get it in. Do you have any pro tips about how you prefer to cut corners? And we can start here.
I like to think of it as just, I am not the consumer, basically. I look at it, if I look at something as an artist, I will see a lot of things that really, really bothers me. Like it can be super small things, like there's a little bit of foot sliding on this third step, right? Yeah. But actually when you play the game and see it as a whole, when you're not that zoomed in on this one part, you can actually cut that. You don't have to care. Like if I try to think about what the player will actually experience, that is the easiest way for me to kind of reframe what I'm looking at and just see, can I make this more effective in some way? Can I speed up the process by cutting those corners that might bother me, but will not bother like 90% of the people who are actually going to play the game? Yeah. That would be my number one thing.
Yeah, that's a really good advice, actually. I think I myself, I totally feel like you looked at me while you said that. I have a tendency to like really hate some stuff I do, and I really want to spend time fixing it, but I know I shouldn't because no one else will see it. And I think that is a common problem as an artist. But how do you feel, Tanja? Do you have any way of cutting corners?
In general, I would not recommend cutting corners so as much as possible. So I would rather spend more time on planning and thinking things through and just prioritize things. So make sure that the really important things that are really visible are done well, and then just spend less time on less important things.
Yeah. Well, that sounds very logical, actually. So I agree. Gustav?
Well, like if it's like really big problems that you really need to solve to deliver the final game experience, like this is an essential thing, then I'd say like setting up good pipelines is like a huge time saver. Like there is a bit of startup time, and like preferably this is something to do during the pre-production phase to try and figure out like, okay, how can we make this into an efficient pipeline? Like again, characters is a really good example where, like, you could reuse the same skeleton, and then therefore all the characters get animations from the get-go without having to do a lot of manual work and reskinning a lot of characters and stuff. Like, it takes the process of making a character down from maybe like 2 weeks to a few days, which is like a huge time saver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like having a good foundation. I'm not sure if it's cutting a corner.
Well, it becomes sort of, I mean, cutting corners, as Tanja said, might not be the best word because it sounds like you're just lazy. But I think that is a good like tip for just make sure the planning is tight enough so you preferably don't have to cut any corners. That is the best way to do it, I would say. What do you say, Johan?
I mean, any way to kind of cut down kind of time spent doing manual intensive kind of labor. A lot of the work done at Massive is, as an environment artist, is actually propping. So, any way to kind of reduce the small little tweaks that you have to do and find, technical solutions for that. And we have good systems for that. So you get a lot of automated randomization. It could be placing cars in division, and they would change the make of the car and color if the windows are open, closed. Like, all this kind of stuff happens. Like, we've had one guy do the initial setup so that it works technically, but he saves so much time from everyone else going in and tweaking each of those parameters over and over again. So like, early spot those kind of things where it's like, we need a good technical solution for this, and we need to find that, figure that out soon and get that in. But then, I mean, you also have the other stuff, like small little things about also sharing knowledge. That can also be a way of like, so people just don't have to go over and do the same thing that someone has already solved on a level 2 months ago. And that's something that I think we tend to do quite a lot, and we encourage people in the team, like the leads kind of give a lot of power to the artist to, if you've done something great and like they've guided you to make a certain room look a certain way, or they're like, all right, do a write-up on that and share that knowledge, and we're gonna then just kind of, get that into the face of every other artist so they know that they should follow this kind of rule set. And then also, like, sometimes as an artist you get stuck and you're like trying to look for ideas, and then I think, look at your other, like your colleagues' work. If they've done something that looks great that you can draw inspiration from, do it. Like,
and I think that is really great advice. It's once again the communication, but it's so prominent in game development that communication will help, and just sharing your knowledge.
But it's so easy to overlook. You just like, oh, I figured out myself. Great, now I can move on. But then, like, if you've had that problem, there's a high probability that someone else is dealing with the same situation.
Exactly. But it's so difficult in my mind sometimes, especially when a deadline is coming up and you're kind of stressed. You tend to sort of zoom in and focus on exactly what you're doing, and you don't have time to talk to everyone. You just want to get your shit done. But I think it's important, as you say, to still maybe take that time, because you will, on the larger scale, save time.
It's going to pay off.
It's going to pay off. So I think that all of you have great suggestions for sort of saving time in your project. I had a question on what Gustav said, but I don't remember what it was. Do you know what it was?
No.
Gustav, bring it back to precious memory.
I remember. And it was actually a combination. You talked about, it was you who said you have a lot of technical solutions, or you make sure that you have the tech you need to speed up your art process. And that is not totally uncontroversial, because there is, now I'm going to get a bit controversial here. If you didn't know, programmers in general make a lot more money than artists. Not always, but usually. So anyway, I'm sorry, artists.
No comments.
So
I don't want to get into this beef.
No. So anyway, some producers, for instance, might feel that the programmers shouldn't spend their time making tools for the artist, because that is more expensive than having the artist do the manual labor. So there is sort of this balance. And I mean, if you look at the project first and foremost, you might still have the programmers spend time. But you mentioned this earlier, Gustav. This was what I was talking about. Sorry, I'm rambling. But anyway, you mentioned that your tech artist or your programmer did some tech art, but now you sort of let him do programming stuff, and you.
Yeah.
So you sort of had the opposite situation where you bring more work to the artists.
Yeah, it's like I find that it's like a really good thing for communication overall as well, because like it means that our people are kind of more a bit more well versed with how things work technically, like just overall, and it kind of like reduces, you know, steps of communication as well. It's like the artist kind of knows what the result the artist wants, so can work and like if they can work toward that themselves on a more technical level, then that's like that's super valuable.
I think that's kind of becoming more and more of a higher demand in the industry in general. When you look at all the new technology that is coming up, like if you're looking at Houdini or Blender or all of these sort of more procedurally focused modeling tools, like having a better technical knowledge as an artist today will probably benefit you a lot, like in the coming years. So like investing in learning new tools and technologies and not getting stuck necessarily at, you know, hand modeling rocks and that sort of stuff. I mean, that's starting to turn into a thing of the past. So like gaining more and more technical knowledge as an artist, it might seem intimidating, but it's actually very liberating once you start to learn these things, that you feel like you can execute so much more.
Yeah,
it's liberating and also very fun. I can strongly recommend it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no.
No, great inputs. I love it when I don't have to ask questions and you just keep talking. It makes my job easier. But anyway, I totally agree, and we've seen this trend coming a long time where the role of an artist is becoming all the more technical with, as you say, Houdini and stuff like that, and procedural generation and shader programs and stuff like that. Do you feel like you sort of have to relearn your craft with all these new tools, or do you feel like it's just fun because you get to learn even more? I
feel like it's just fun. Like I feel like you are in the danger zone if you're very stuck in a rut and it's like, I can draw with a pen on paper, right? But is that all you do? Is that all you will ever do? Like you can still draw. Like the tool doesn't really matter. Like there are technical hurdles to get over, but the more kind of tools you have at your disposal, like the basics are the same. Like you learn composition, you learn color, you learn lighting, all that sort of stuff. Then it's just a matter of executing it in different ways depending on the tool you're using. So
yeah, I agree.
And it's also more accessible than ever. Like it used to be really, really hard to do this sort of stuff. Now there are visual node networks and stuff. So as long as you can have like a logical chain of thought, you can pull it off. Like I am not technical, but even I can do some procedural stuff, right?
But how do you roll out that thing to like a bigger team or something like that? When you found some new technology that you want to incorporate into your teams, like how do you do that? Like, is it just you starting doing that and then like convincing them just by see how easy this is? Or?
Yeah, like ideally that would be, and there is where I wish I was more technical than I am, because I can see potential in it, but I would need someone who is more technically adept than me to actually make it a proof of concept, because I know that there is so much potential in a tool, but it's really hard to, especially if you're already in production, to introduce a new tool. Like it's probably something you should wait with until the next project and the next pre-production, all that sort of stuff. But lobbying for new tools and getting people to change their habits and accept new workflows is really, really hard. We are creatures of habit, all of us, but it's really important to try to break free of that and actually.
And I guess you really have to distill what that tool is going to give you and what the main benefit of that is, or like where do we see this technical solution fit into our pipeline where it can save us a bunch of time and headaches. Like that's really important. And at least for us, when I think about these kind of things, like it's already like, whoo, it's a big thing to kind of like say, I want everyone to do Houdini at our work, you know? So like you need to really think about how you make it accessible and easy to work with for the people, and that's something that we need to think a lot about, and that we maybe haven't done so much in the past too. It was like I want I want there to be a priority in thinking of like how is the end user, in this case being the developer, not the player.
Yeah.
How are they going to use these tools? You know, like someone might be sitting developing a little thing on their side and like, we should do this. This is awesome. Look at my little thing that I have on my screen. But I'm like, yes, but how do you propagate that so it works and everyone knows what they're doing with those tools? Like that's a tricky part.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up on that. But I also want to say, if you have any questions from the audience, we can sort of do this hybrid because, well, it's fun to have audience questions. So if you have a question, just go up to the mic and wave to me and I will shut up. Otherwise, I will keep asking questions. So,
or you save it for later when there's a moment, or
maybe not.
No.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, the follow-up question was: you talk about these like new tools, and it's important to find what works for the artist and so on. But how does it work at each your respective company? Is that the role of you as an artist to kind of suggest, oh, this tool would be awesome for artists, or does it come from higher up or from tech or from a producer, or how does that work? And we can go through it this way. So start with you, Johan, again.
Yeah, I think at our company, basically anyone could suggest adopting new tools if they can prove that it would benefit us in some way. So it's really important, I think, to have multiple different eyes from multiple perspectives and multiple different. Because I don't know all of the problems that like a character artist will encounter or an environment artist will encounter. Those suggestions are best if they actually come from those people. I might find something that I think is super interesting and I might show it to an environmental artist. Like, what do you think of Houdini? Like, it seems pretty cool, right? But then they're like, nah. So anyone at our company could definitely do it if they put their back into it and actually demonstrated results.
Yeah. How do you do it?
For our project, it was since it was so tight on the schedule, we didn't have much time to really explore stuff. So we didn't get much tools or new tools. But since we are a small team, if somebody finds something that makes their life easier, then they will just bring it up, and we then look at it and integrate it if we have use for it.
Yeah, that's great. What about you?
Yeah, so I think for us, it depends on like the context of the tool, I guess, that we're looking at. Like if it's a production tool that doesn't have anything to do with the game really, like what 3D modeling software do we use, or do we use SpeedTree? I don't know. Then it's like 100% up to the artist to like make a case that this is worth the investment of both time and money to get started with this software. Like recently we jumped ship from Maya LT to Blender, because Blender is free and it's really good. But I was really angry for 3 weeks when trying to learn Blender.
That's good.
Yeah, maybe 3 years. But it was really annoying to get into. But like once we did get into it, like it made life a lot easier.
Yeah.
From my LT at least. But like if it's like an in-engine thing or something in the game, it's like, oh, this technical solution that we have in the engine that's going to have an impact on the code of the game or like the game environment. That's something we also run by the programmer specifically to give a thumbs up that this is going to work for our purposes, so it doesn't break anything. Pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can only echo sort of like what Gustav was saying here a little bit about. It depends on the level of this kind of technical solution.
Yeah.
If it's if it's more like an artist kind of thing, like how you make the material or how you do that, that's sort of like up to them to figure out and spread among their team. But if it's something more kind of for the game in general, then that would go through like tech directors, programmers, what is feasible, what is not, and then like, is this something we really need for the game? And then they're gonna roll that through and push that to like all the disciplines that it's gonna affect, and this is why we need to do it this way.
Yeah, of course, and it sounds like you all have sort of this nice setup where you have sort of a free climate where you can present like, oh, I found this tool, it's going to be great for me, and then suggest it and research it, of course. But then you as an artist are able to implement it possibly, because there are cases, I mean, where you might do a change to Blender from Maya. That is made somewhere completely else, and it can be super frustrating. I've been in that situation as well, where I was angry for, I think, more than 3 weeks. But but yeah, so it sounds like a healthy way to look at it, because as you mentioned, Johan, it's the artist who works with whatever it is, environment art. They know environment art best, and I think it's important to always give the trust to sort of the expert. That's why you hire them to begin with. So. Super interesting. No questions? You want me to keep going? All right. So, I read a bit random, so excuse me for a second. I'm going to see where I was.
That's all right.
All right. So, speaking of tools, perfect. Are there any tools you as an artist could not cope without? Like, they help you immensely in your work. We can do the same thing again. Start here.
I mean, the boring but probably most honest answer is just communication. Yeah. Actually,
thinking somewhere along the line of that too.
That's the one thing that you can't get through a game development process without being able to compromise every aspect through communication.
Yeah. And it was a surprising answer. I was, in my mind, as a tool, I thought technical, and then you threw that back at me, and that's true as well. I wish I thought of it. Right, Tanja?
Yeah, I would second that. Also, communication is extremely important, especially for us since we are 2 studios.
Oh, yeah.
And also, for instance, we were using a lot of Discord. That was really useful because you can also stream on Discord. So when we playtest our game, then we can have just a stream up, and people can just talk with each other and just point out things and ask the people playing to do certain things. So that's really helpful.
That's super helpful, and it's super interesting that you mentioned these like communication tools and softwares that sort of help collaboration, because that is such an obvious thing. But many people, when they think of tools, me included, think of like Houdini or something that or a cool plugin that works nice. So Gustav.
Okay, so kind of in the spirit of like more communication tools, like I think like when trying to find compromises and stuff, like the like having an actual like art Bible and like an art Bible and a story Bible and stuff like that really helps a lot with trying to figure out where stuff should, like where we can be more lenient with compromising stuff.
Oh yeah.
Because that gives like such a clear framework of, like this, like Passepartout 2 that we're working on right now, for example. Like one core pillar of the game is that it's supposed to be accessible. Yeah. So like it's supposed to be available on as many devices as possible. It's supposed to be playable in any way you want, and like that's a really big thing that we can make a lot of decisions based on. So that's super helpful, like in a communication sense, that it kind of takes it away from being like, this is my opinion, to this is what's best for the game. So it kind of removes the dialogue from the personal level, in a really handy way. Yeah,
that's a really good tip. I mean, documentation might sound like boring stuff. We don't need that. I have all ideas in here, but it's so helpful, and as you say as well, to sort of also sometimes to just move away your own opinions, or have something to prove your opinion. Like, no, it says so in the Bible. That's why I'm saying that we should do it this way. Yeah. So super good tip.
And then there's something else in the Bible that you can counter with.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, but this part of the Bible says that.
Yeah. Then we need to rewrite it.
And then someone says it's deprecated. This is old. And
okay, I'm not saying it's not problematic.
Don't ever go and read that page. I was like, why is it on there?
Well, don't want to remove it.
I kind of like the font.
There's some issues there sometimes. I mean, I wish I had like a cool like software that solves a bunch of things, right? Like this is the one thing every developer needs.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a lot of what these people here already talk about, like the communication stuff. I mean, obviously for us, a big one is Snowdrop, because that's what, as an environment artist, that's where you spend, like 80% of your time for the most part. Like we don't actually do a lot of modeling. We do a little bit of blockouts and stuff like that. But that's pretty much to the extent that we do that. And then it's all spending time in Snowdrop. And that's actually is really powerful in terms of even how it's integrated to our source kind of thing and how we can see who has changed stuff and who has been tweaking these layers, and you can kind of, hey, what have you done here? And you can find out. So that is very powerful and a super helpful thing. But yeah, communication stuff and like all that stuff that these people are already.
Yeah, but that is something I agree on as well. And the sort of the game engine, whatever the game engine is sort of a platform for communication as well and collaboration, because everything is going to go in there. You need to communicate with everyone to sort of make that package work. Now we just have a few minutes left, I think. So, come on. Questions from you as well. I want to hear what you wonder. You might not wonder anything I'm asking. So, So, they are not dangerous.
Just a little.
Some of them might be. But I will protect you. So, please. Yes.
Hello. This might be a diffuse question, I don't know. But is there any type of like risk analysis when it comes to artistic decisions?
Yes.
A lot short answer, yes.
Yep. Like every artistic decision has to be kind of weighed against, is this compatible with what we're doing? Can we already, do this? Well, how much time will it take? Like just the level of fidelity if you're planning out an art style. Like a level of fidelity can both be a time saver and a drawback. Like if you do like a super stylized game, for instance, with very little detail, all of a sudden all of the prop placement and stuff, like the composition of the elements becomes hugely important. While if you do a very, very highly detailed environment, you can kind of scatter things about and make people accept it just through the sheer value of detail on screen. Like you don't really know exactly what to focus on, so it just looks expensive. Like so yeah, there's a lot of thought and kind of evaluation going into just the art style and everything actually.
And what eventually like serves the game the most, right? Like so it's a good question, but it's something that we always try to take into consideration somehow.
Yeah, and I like it that the one question I don't ask is sort of the most clever one, because that is a brilliant question.
Hey, come on, give yourself some credit.
Yeah, okay. No, but it's a really good question. I mean, this whole thing is sort of just what you're saying. It's about risk assessment before going into whatever you're going to create. You need to sort of, and that's what you've been talking about as well, sort of foresee stuff happening. What tools do you need? How will you communicate it, and all of that.
Yeah.
So great question. We have time for some more.
For you, environment artist, was there something that surprised you about the industry, or was it as you expected it to be?
A lot of things surprised me, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, just the layer of communication, that's one thing, like that you need to be comfortable doing that. That's one that I can think of that was like really like, oh shit, you really need to be able to communicate like that and be... but I think that's at least at Massive, they try to foster you into being comfortable with that and set up those situations for you. I mean, even early on, I think there's a little bit of, once you're starting out, you can feel like you need to kind of prove yourself a little bit and and all that kind of stuff. I try to work against a little bit, having this kind of heart of like, well, you're here now, like, do your thing now, show us what you're made of, and trying to encourage people to just like, this is a cool environment, we will help you if you're gonna fail at some point, and we want to just course correct you and make sure that you do the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, and I think that is a good tip, and it sort of has to do with we're artists. We have imposter syndrome. That's a fact, basically. So when we get into a company, it's very horrifying to feel what you say, like, I need to prove myself and I can't fail. So it's good that you sort of foster this mentality. But you're an environment artist as well. Were there any surprises for you getting into it?
Maybe something that I didn't expect was that the game you end up with is never the thing you thought you would produce when you started working on it. So it took me a while to kind of get to terms with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's super interesting because, yeah, that's usually the case. You start off with this vision and you feel like, oh, yeah, I understand this game. But the more you work on it, the more you feel like, oh, this is a completely different game, but it's cool. Nice.
And yeah, and also be comfortable with the unknown, like sort of like what you're saying there, that you don't, like during the progress and the process of making a game, you don't really see how everything is going to come together as well. So like, you just gotta have to trust that like that team is gonna do their thing and it's gonna make for this kind of. So you gotta be comfortable not knowing everything.
Is it kind of a thing where you want to enjoy the craft, not necessarily the subject matter? Right?
Yeah,
like,
a little bit like that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have time for one last question, so welcome.
All right, very nice panel. I really liked it. A lot of good information here. I just wanted to ask, since the name of the panel is Compromising on Art, and that kind of indicates like not like a conflict, but some kind of disagreement between parties because you're compromising on something. And so we had another panel up here on the forum thing where we were talking about constructive criticism, don't shoot yourself in the foot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can there be like a lot of conflicts when you're trying to figure out how broad your artistic freedom wants to be? You talked a little bit about constraining it a bit yourself a bit, and that makes it better. But can there be like big conflicts in these situations that you have to solve, and how do you solve them? Like within your company, in a bigger company, or like in a smaller company? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, someone else want to go?
Really, really good question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of conflicts, like for sure. They can be pretty big. Like I have screamed at people at the office at times. Like, I mean, yeah. I mean, the best way to solve it, I feel like, is to not assume that I'm right. Like I have to try to understand where the criticism is coming from, and why the other person is saying that. Like my knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be a confrontation. It should be like, okay, you have this feedback or this opinion. Like, is this based on something, or is this something that I should take into consideration? Like, if I'm not right, what can I do to still be in line with what I have in mind? Or do I have the wrong opinion? Like, from the beginning, like, do I have the wrong interpretation? And because that is a much better kind of framework, I feel like, to actually have a valuable discussion and come up with a compromise that feels fair. That being said, though, I don't think you should always compromise. I think there are, like when you compromise too much, you take away the edge from something. Like that design by committee, like having 8 people in a room deciding what a character should look like, is not actually a good idea if you want to create a character that has some sort of impact. Whether you have if you want to make something that has some sort of emotional reaction, you have to be able, you have to take a chance that some people might not like it, right? Because otherwise, no people will love it. Having people be neutral against my art is worse than people actually disliking it. Yeah.
That's a super interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, and obviously, like you were saying there as well, like you also gotta, I tend to always think that like everyone wants the best for the thing, so it's always any criticism, any feedback that you're getting is coming from a good kind of place. Maybe even if it doesn't sound like that, maybe all the time, like it might be a little bit harsh, and you'd be like, "Whoa, maybe you could hold back a little bit on that." But they want it to just be better, and I think if you go into every conflict like that a little bit, like everyone just wants the best for product, that's gonna help the conversation and be more fruitful for the conversation. So I think that's good to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. But great questions and great panel. Thank you once again. You're awesome, all of you. And if you want to talk more art, I guess some of them will hang around and you can just snatch them up. I decided that now. They didn't tell me.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm
so
here.
Thank you. If you have more questions, just find us and ask.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.